Greetings, comrades. We have with us today Comrade Fabio Bosco from Brazil. He's a trade union organizer and linked with the CSP con Lutas, and also a comrade of the International Workers' League. Fabio, without further ado.
Hello, Adiraj. Hello, all brothers and sisters that are following us in the YouTube channel Mazdoor Inquilab.
Right. So Comrade Fabio is here with us today to talk about the Ukraine conflict, our position and the background of the conflict. Onward to you, Fabio.
Okay. Look, this war that Russia is carrying out against Ukraine, it's very important for us to understand something. It's true that before the invasion, the main dispute was between NATO, which is led by the US with European imperialism, and Russia. Okay, that's true. But in February 24, Russian troops invaded Ukraine. And so the struggle of the Ukrainian people to liberate their country becomes the center of the conflict. And it's the only military conflict that's happening. There's no military confrontation between NATO and Russia. What there are Russian troops inside Ukraine trying to conquer the territory, the cities, and doing criminal bombardments against the cities. That's what we have now. So I think that it's very important for us to understand who is the victim. You see, there is a victim here, and the victim is the Ukrainian people. It's not Russia, it's the Ukrainian people. So when there is a war, we must always see if there is one side which the working class should support. And in this case, many wars, the working class should not support any sides and should oppose both, should fight for the defeat of their own country. But in this case, it's a fair war, a fair self-defense of the Ukrainian people against the Russian aggression. So in our understanding, the working class internationally should take sides with Ukraine against Russia for the Russian troops to go out of Ukraine and stop the aggression.
Okay. Comrade, can you tell us of what forces within Ukraine are operating? What forces are there, political and military? What are the various factions?
Okay. Let me explain something before. You see, Vladimir Putin says that he attacked Ukraine because he wants to fight back NATO, which is putting Russia under siege. He also says that he wants to denazify Ukraine, okay? And what's important for us to see here, first, it's true that NATO has a dispute against Russia, and it's putting it, and it's placing Russia in a certain way under siege. That's true. But what's the point? The way to fight back NATO is not to invade Ukraine, because invading Ukraine, you give more popularity to NATO in the countries that are affiliated to NATO. You give more popularity to NATO among the Ukrainian people and the former oppressed, the oppressed peoples in the former Soviet Union republics. So the way to fight back NATO would be to coordinate with labor, with young organizations inside the countries which are affiliated to NATO to demand its dismantling, you see? So what Putin is doing is not to fight back NATO. On the opposite, he's making NATO stronger. And if Putin wins NATO will place more troops and more military equipment on all the countries which are affiliated to them near Russia. The second reason that Putin talks about, which is the denazification, look, that's essentially a lie. Because what happens in Ukraine, after the revolution that happened in 2014, it's a kind of liberal democracy or bourgeois democracy, you see. And Zelensky is a politician, a right-wing politician in a capitalist countries, who represents the capitalist class, like other countries across the world. The country which has a very, very authoritarian regime, it's Russia. In Russia, the civil liberties are small, are curbed, are smashed every day by the regime that's led by. In Ukraine, there are 350 political parties that are legalized. There is freedom for labor organizing. There is freedom for demonstrations. So it's a capitalist country. It's a liberal regime, a liberal democratic regime. So this reason which Putin is placing it's a lie, you see. And inside Ukraine, the resistance, you have the army, but you also have the people and the working class self-organizing themselves. I myself, I made an interview with two activists, you see. One is the president of the Independent Miners Workers Union of Ukraine, and the other one is an activist that worked with independent labor unions near Donetsk. And what they say, that the workers, what they are doing, they are preparing to stop the Russians, you see. They are preparing barricades, they are exploding some bridges to preventing the Russian troops to get to their cities easier. They are preparing Molotov cocktails. I mean, the means to resist. So you have both the conventional army, which is fighting back Russia, but you also have a people's resistance that expresses itself in many ways. Politically, inside Ukraine today, both the bourgeois forces and the working class forces, they are fighting back Russia troops at this moment. But we have always to pay attention in the capitalists, you see, because the capitalists, they are worried about their business. So they are prepared to compromise with Putin if Putin guarantees to them their business. So this is very, very problematic, you see, because Zelensky what's Zelensky talking to Putin in these bargainings that are going out all these days? They are talking about, on the one side, the interests of Putin, which is to seize parts of Ukrainian territory. I mean, Donetsk province, Luhansk province, Crimea, the southern coastal areas of Ukraine, Kharkiv. Putin wants to bring all these sections of Ukrainian territory to annex them to Russia. You see, that's what Putin wants. And Putin wants also a government in Ukraine which is allied to him. As in Belarus, you see, exactly the same thing in Belarus. So Putin wants that. And Zelensky and the Ukrainian capitalists, they want to keep their business. That's what they want. And they can get into an agreement. And so only the working class will be the force that will stay and will resist against the occupation and the seizure of lands by Russia.
Yes, that clears a lot of ground for us. you were mentioning that there is a solidarity campaign in place. Can you tell us about that in brief?
Yeah. The Brazilian People's Labor and People's Federation, CSP com Lutas, together with the French Labor Federation, Solidaire, and other organizations, we are launching an international campaign of solidarity to the Ukrainian working class. You see, we want to make a workers' campaign in solidarity to the workers in Ukraine. You see, from the working class, which is outside the country, to the working class, which is inside the country. So we are in touch with the Independent Miners Union of Ukraine. We make an interview with the president, and we are in touch with him to see how to build this campaign. You see, we are planning to raise funding. We are planning to give talks, to make lives, to carry out, to hold demonstrations, to show our solidarity, you see, towards them. And let me tell you just one thing that I think it's important, Adiraj. You know that among left-wing organizations, what happens is that the majority of the left-wing organizations, primarily the communist parties, they are siding with Putin. They say anything to justify this aggression against Ukrainian people. So, but we also have another section of left-wing organizations who have a kind of neutral position, or something that talks only about peace or against the war. But this position is limited because today, to stop the Russian troops, it's necessary not only to say against the war and Russian troops out, it's necessary to send weapons to the resistance in Ukraine to expel the Russian troops, because there is a military conflict. If we oppose other countries from sending weapons to the Ukrainian resistance, what we are doing is to help Russia to smash the Ukrainian people. So this is one issue. And the other issue is about sanctions. You see, we must support sanctions and more sanctions against Russia while the invasion remains. You see, because the sanctions today is a valid tactic to make Russia weaker, to see how to help the Ukrainian resistance to defeat the Russian troops. Because look, it's very difficult to defeat Russia. Russia is at least 10 times more powerful militarily than Ukraine. But we know in history that even the strongest empires were defeated, may be defeated by oppressed peoples, like what happened to America in Afghanistan, in Vietnam, what happened to Russia in Afghanistan, in the first war in Chechen. So we know that it's possible and it's necessary to defeat Russia. So we don't agree with the people that says we are only for peace and we oppose sending weapons or for Ukrainian resistance, or the ones who oppose sanctions. We are in favor of the victory of the Ukrainian people, you see? And for that goal, it's necessary to have weapons, to have sanctions. I talked to the president of this mine workers union, and what he told me, he said, we need weapons, food, and medicine. So I think that our stand must be clear, you see? We must help the Ukrainian people the way we can. And the Ukrainian people have the right to take weapons from whoever provide these weapons to them. So I think it's important to make this discussion clearly with all of us who fight for a better world where the working class can have the power to decide their future.
Right, Comrade Fabio, thank you for bringing us these wonderful insights into the Ukrainian conflict, into the war against Ukraine, and we hope that we can talk with you further about this. And best of luck and more power to you for the solidarity campaign. The link to the interview will be provided in the description of this video. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Lal salam.
Inkilab Zindabad. Lal Salam.